Hi, everybody. My name is Noah Fischer, and I'm here in Brooklyn, New York. And thanks to Ivor and Marita for inviting me to Risk and Rebellion. I want to speak a little bit about Occupy Wall Street from the perspective of 2021. I was on Zuccotti Park from the first day, and I consider Occupy to be a movement in the left tradition of populism. This means the attempt to build coalitions across different struggles. In Occupy, we are seeking to bridge issues such as housing insecurity following the 2008 crash, the ballooning of debt markets that target the middle class and poor, the warming climate, which Hurricane Katrina and Sandy exposed as not only environmental issues, but social justice issues. And Occupy was also a moment of optimism that we could connect struggles across national lines. When I was in the General Assembly, I learned about direct democracy from comrades that had just come back from Tahrir Square and from Puerto del Sol, and from people who had been through the anti-globalization movement in Genoa a decade before, and even before that. As an artist, I became involved in connecting Occupy Wall Street to museums. I was inspired by the fact that the Louvre had been opened during the French Revolution. So I knew that museums are symbols of democracy, but also of its opposite. In the US, museums are mostly privately funded by the financial elites, and they use them as vehicles for private art market investments, and also often for public relations, like we saw in the case of BP in England, but in the case of the banks and all the different corporations that brand museums, and also individuals like Candors in New York. This is an embodiment of the uncritical celebration of philanthropy that we have in the US. And that is why we occupy Wall Street, because capital had overwhelmed the elected government through lobbying, where they were able to actually program the nation's behavior through its laws to benefit themselves. In fact, in the US, there are no examples of legislation that are passed that are contrary to the will of the lobbies. The only legislation that's passed that is popular legislation is passed at the point where the lobbies come together, in coordination with popular opinion. That was a decade ago. And now we nearly have the world's first trillionaires after the wealth that has been concentrated during the pandemic. And things a decade ago seem rather simple now. At the time, we credited social media with helping us organize the movements. But now we've seen Facebook, Amazon, and Twitter move to silence Trump, which essentially demonstrates that they're more powerful than the government. In the US, we're also now fully in line with the right-wing populism that's been growing up around the globe. And the rise of Trump has had the effect in the US of pushing the politics of economic inequality back on its heels, because working class politics is now tainted with the politics of white rage and white supremacy that became the base of Donald Trump. So Trump has empowered anti-populist elites in the center who have eagerly adopted the program of representing progressive values while pushing back against the politics of redistribution. Here in New York, for example, the very same museums that have been focusing on exhibiting Black artists and immigrants and queer and trans voices are now busy trying to destroy the efforts to unionize among their precarious employees. So unfortunately, the arts are at the very center of this anti-populist project and this giant contradiction that we're now facing. We have to watch out as artists among the movements that we are not instrumentalized for the elite capture of the social movements. But recently we saw a strong surge of support for Bernie, who basically embodies the language of Occupy with the 1% and 99%. And then after the pandemic hit in the summer, we saw a massive, beautiful uprising around Black Lives Matter. The problem is that these two movements appear to be disconnected. The way forward has to be uniting the struggles of decolonial and racial environmental justice with the struggles of economic equality. And this is a left-wing populism. And it must also be a transnationalism. Thank you.